Hi, my name is John from DD Car Inspections. I've been inspecting cars for many years, and I'd like to give you a few tips on what to look for. One of the most common faults that I come across on used cars is the clutch. Now, even though clutch might be operational, it can be faulty. And how you test for a faulty clutch is it should be smooth in operation as you depress the pedal. In other words, it doesn't get any harder as you press the clutch. That's one way of telling. If it gets harder, it means it's worn. The most obvious way to check the clutch would be to see if it's slipping. Put the car in gear and with the handbrake on and let the clutch out slowly and see does the car stall. That's another way of testing for slippage, but modern cars seldom slip. Another fault with clutches is what they call a dual mass flywheel. This has been fitted to cars. Most cars actually now have a dual mass flywheel. This makes the operation of the clutch very smooth. The best way to check this out is to put the car in gear, in first gear, and see if the car will pull off and tick over. If you have to rev the car, it means to pull off. It means there's something wrong with the clutch. So in other words, it should pull away on tick over. Another way to check the clutch is listen for noises. When you're in the car with the engine running and you press the clutch, if the engine note changes, you know there's something wrong with the clutch, or perhaps the gearbox. The gearbox is another item that needs to be checked in cars. If the car is a Dublin reg car, it's more suspect than a country reg car. The reason for this is speed ramps, speed bumps. Cars are not designed to go over speed bumps. No manufacturer designs a car to go over speed bumps. So you need to check the gearbox carefully on a Dublin registered car. The easiest way to check it, I suppose, is to drive it through the gears and see if it operates correctly. But look for wear and tear by changing from, as you're driving, change from third down to second. If there's any kind of a crunch or hesitation going into second gear, you know the synchros are worn. And if the synchro is worn, you can be sure the rest of the gearbox is worn as well. That's the easiest way anyway that I know, and that's what I check for. The engine is probably the most important thing to check when you're buying a used car. Most modern engines are pretty good and will last a long time, but I'll give you a few tips on how to check the engine anyway. The first thing you really need to check for is power. Does the engine have the correct amount of power for the cc of the engine? A low powered engine means it's, either got faults or is worn out. You need to, maybe drive some other cars and compare the two. A good way of checking for faults in the engine is to put the car in the wrong gear. In other words, if you're doing say 10 mile an hour, put the car in third gear and see if the car will pull away smoothly without any splutters or stops or hesitations. Another way to check an engine is to check the oil. Remove the dipstick and put your fingers through the oil on the dipstick and rub them together. If you can see your fingers, the skin tone of your fingers through the oil, that means the oil is fairly clean. If you can't see your fingers, it means the oil is dirty, and that's a bad sign on an engine. If the car is a diesel car, smell your fingers and see if there's a smell of sulfur from it. If the car is a petrol car, smell the oil and see if you can smell a petrol smell from it. That's also a bad sign. Another good way to check an engine is by the amount of back pressure. Back pressure is the amount of pressure that's built up by the pistons in the engine. With the engine running, loosen the oil filler cap. On a diesel engine, for example, just loosen the cap and with the engine running and see how much fumes or smoke comes out of the filler cap. Really there should be none. And my own personal car is 195,000 on a diesel engine, and there is no back pressure, no fumes, and no smoke. So if you see any smoke or fumes, it's not a good sign. On a petrol car, you're looking for the same thing, except the fumes are a different colour and they smell differently. They usually smell of like petrol. If you've got fumes, they usually smell of like petrol. That's a bad sign. There should be no real particular smell of the oil, both in a petrol and on a diesel car. The oil filler cap can be used as an indicator of the head gasket on the car. If the car is a high mileage car and you stop the engine and remove the cap, and if there's a creamy sludge under the cap, it could be a sign that the head gasket's gone. In fact, it's quite likely on a high mileage car, and it would have to be investigated further. Now, if on the other hand the car is a low mileage car and you remove the cap and see a creamy sludge under the bottom of the cap, it doesn't really mean anything. You know, if you suspect the head gasket for another reason, well, check it out. But creamy sludge in a low mileage car is normal. Obviously, check that the car is not overheating itself. Check the temperature gauge. Turn on the heater in the car. Make sure the heater operates and it doesn't get too hot inside the car. If the heater is too hot, it means the car is overheating. If the car doesn't heat up enough, it means somebody has removed the thermostat. All these things need to be checked really before you part with your money. Clocking. This is the action of turning back the speedometer clock on the car. You know, for example, if a car is registering 100,000 miles, someone can either digitally turn this back with the use of a computer to maybe 50,000, or it can be done manually. Either way, this is an activity that's really done in Ireland. One of the reasons behind this is it's not illegal to clock your car in Ireland. So if it's not illegal, people are doing it. Now, a large motoring organisation came on RTE and said that they found that 55% of used cars were clocked. Now, we do a lot of inspections, as you know, and we actually can concur that 55% is the right figure, because that's our figure as well. So, how do you know if a car is clocked? This can be a hard question for the average car driver. He can't really tell because he hasn't got enough experience. He's only in one or two cars, so he can't really tell. But we can tell because we're in and out of cars all day, every day, and we know what to look for and when the car is genuine mileage. Probably the easiest way to tell if a car is clocked is to look at the bodywork. A low mileage car will have very shiny paintwork. This is usually, in modern cars, it's usually lacquered, and the lacquer remains shiny for a couple of 100,000 miles. But if the paintwork is dull, you know that the car has done a lot of miles. Other clues to look for are a worn steering wheel. A leather steering wheel is a real giveaway. Leather steering wheels are pretty robust and don't show any signs of wear. So look for the steering wheel. If the steering wheel is worn, it's a bad sign. As you get in and out the car, there are door rubbers. Look for wear and tear on the door rubbers. Look at the driver's seat. Look for wear and tear on the driver's seat. Modern seats are very tough, and they last a long time. 200,000 is about the average life of a driver's seat. So if there's wear and tear on the driver's seat, you know it's done a lot of mileage. But mileage is the single biggest issue on used cars. As I say, over 50% of those cars are clocked. Now, interestingly enough, 100% of these cars are sold. So that means that half the people buying cars are buying clock cars. You know, I don't understand that myself, but anyway, they should have these cars professionally checked, and then they wouldn't get caught that way. Another problem facing the used car buyer is cons and scams. Now, I could probably talk for a half an hour on this subject, so I'm just going to take it up randomly as I think of them. The one con that I keep coming across is clocking all the time. It's unbelievable the amount of cars that are clocked. Now, we've spoken about that earlier. Another problem that I'm coming across more and more often now is fraudulent NCTs. You can tell whether an NCT is fraudulent or not. It should have a hologram on it. If it doesn't have a hologram, you know there's something wrong with it. Another scam that I'm coming across, again in no particular order, is cars that are stolen. The scam is that there's a car for sale, somebody goes out to buy the car, gives the owner of the car a draft for the full asking price for the car, and then before the check can clear, they put the same car back on the internet again for a much lower price and sell it out for cash. The new buyer thinks he's getting a bargain and buys the car, only to find out that the car is actually stolen and he'll have to give it back and be at the loss of his money. To my knowledge, this has happened twice this year to people I know, so that's one to look out for. That cost 11,000 to one customer and 13,000 to another customer, so be very careful with this particular type of scam. Make sure you go into the seller's house if you're buying the car and only part with the money in the seller's house. At least that way you have some hope of tracing the guy if anything does go wrong. Never ever meet in a garage or car parking with money, or never pay for the car in a garage. Now, I can't stress this enough. Never ever ever pay for the car anywhere except in the seller's house. And ideally the car should be registered to the seller. This is, you know, you're not really buying the seller's history, but it's a real good indicator if the car is registered to the seller. I could go on and on about these scams all day, but I'm getting bored with that. But just be very, very careful. Do not part with money. Remember that most of these cars are being sold by con men. Half the cars are being sold with clock mileage, so you already know that you're dealing with half the sellers are con men. So whether they beat you up and mug you and take your money off you is of little consequence to these guys. So be very careful. Again, it's if you bring somebody independent like me with you, you're far more protected than if you go on your own. This year I've caught 2 or 3 people out on this type of thing and managed to save people from being ripped off. And going back to the NCTs, 4 cars I've looked at so far this year have had fraudulent NCT certs in the window. So, you know, beware of cons. Anyway, I think I've given you plenty to look at. My advice to you as a car buyer is to get your car professionally and independently checked out. There are things that a professional will know about the car that you may not know, and it's always better to get an independent assessment of the car. If for no other reason, you get peace of mind, and even if it's a second opinion or a third opinion, your hard-earned cash, you've got to be careful of it. Thank you for watching.